Good morning, Dan Delmar in for Elias. Couple more days. He and wife and baby are doing much better. Caught a little nasty virus. Let's come back to the by-election as well as take a look down south. I think there's a tie-in to what Justin Trudeau is doing in terms of his political strategy, as well as the Democrats. I think perhaps try to capture some of that energy from down south and repurpose it here up north. But let's dig in to the by-election and a little bit of what's happening in the States with Jonathan Kalles, Senior Director at McMillan Vantage, a national public affairs firm, and former advisor to PM Trudeau. Hello, Jonathan.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm a little tired. It was a late night.
I'm sure. So were you working on this by-election for Liberals, just to situate your vantage point here?
I was not working on the by-election. I was doing some punditry through the evening.
Okay, I see. Your thoughts. So was this a surprise to you? Because it seemed like a lot of pundits were suggesting this could go another way. Mulcair, myself, I think we saw the block wave coming a little bit here in the riding.
No, I agree with you. I'm not surprised. I mean, one poll. I don't know that I base it on the one poll or the Main Street poll, but just anecdotally talking to people in the riding, even talking to some Anglo-Allo Federalist voters who were, for the most part, I would say, looking to park their votes, and clearly were dissatisfied, unhappy, fed up, frustrated. Pick your choice with the current government and with Justin Trudeau. So, that's what I was hearing. It's still surprising sometimes when people actually vote for the Bloc and they're not separatists. But, it's not new. That's something that people outside of Quebec never understand. But sometimes that happens here. What I think is surprising is that in the normal situation where you have people tied to the government, they're progressive voters for the most part, you would assume they would go vote for the NDP, especially writing that, other than some specific pockets more in the Verdun area, are not, it was mostly a federalist writing, didn't vote for the NDP as the alternative. And I know the margin between all three parties is relatively close, and drawing conclusions is limited. But, the NDP picked a weak candidate, the wokiest of woke candidates, who made this campaign about Gaza. If you look at the demographics in the writing, it's got a very small population for whom that's issue number one. So, they picked a candidate who has, name recognition. He's a city councillor in mostly the next over borough, but he comes with a lot of baggage, including old accusations against him that had never been settled. And again, this focus on Gaza. So I think that's a rejection of him, but it's also a rejection of Jagmeet Singh having a bad couple of weeks, trying to distance himself from the Liberals. But what he's landed up doing is costing himself a lot of credibility. So I think he had a bad night. Obviously, the Liberals lost a seat. They had a bad night. The Conservatives, who, weren't expecting to do anything in Quebec, but were trying to pick up in Winnipeg, didn't have a great night because they didn't win after a lot of outreach by Poilievre to blue-collar union members. So the winner of the night's the Bloc Québécois.
Okay, yeah, I would say it's a big win for the Bloc Québécois. And zooming out in terms of the future of the Prime Minister, is this one more reason you think why Liberals could suggest that the change in leadership before the election might be necessary if we could, even as I've speculated, be looking at the prospect of a Bloc opposition?
I don't really see it for a whole bunch of reasons, but I just don't see anything changing between yesterday and today that's suddenly going to make the Prime Minister wake up and say, oh, you know what? Now I've changed my mind. Until now I was digging in my heels, but now I've changed my mind. I think it's just a continuation of where his mind has been. And he's, I think, in it to run against Poilievre. You heard him yesterday in the House coming back in a sort of this combative way. And we'll see what that does, if it's able to change the story at all or not. But I think he's in this to run until he loses or wins in the next election.
I want to segue a bit into U.S. politics, and I do see on the communication standpoint a lot of borrowing, I would say, from tactics from the Democrats and from the Kamala Harris camp, even phrases, like weird and all that kind of stuff. Is that working? Is that invigorating the Liberal base or offering to Liberals some momentum that perhaps you're absorbing from the Democrats down south?
I think that's the hope. I don't think it's actually working, certainly not yet. Well, there's a couple really big differences. One is Trump is already pretty defined. Love him or hate him, there's not many people in between. So he's pretty defined. In going after him in a specific way, you can expect certain results. In Canada, I think that Pierre Poilievre is still not particularly well defined with the majority of the electorate. People still don't really know him. Yes, they've done a lot of ad campaigns. They've tried to soften his image. But he's not there yet. We're not in an election campaign. The focus is not particularly on him. Most Canadians can't really tell you very much about him, whether they like him or not. And so trying to use the tactics that are being used in the States so far aren't working because, well, just because the Liberals say so doesn't make it true necessarily until they form their own opinion of Pierre Poilievre. Can it work? Certainly possible. And every once in a while, he'll fall into the trap of using similar language that you'll hear from MAGA Republicans from Trump. And he sets himself up to be attacked on those things. So let's see how he plays the next few months. And if the Liberal strategy continues, let's see if it actually sticks. So far, clearly it's not.
In the U.S., there's certainly a lot of talk about political rhetoric and about whether or not Democrats have gone too far with threats to democracy and all of that. That's what the Republicans are saying over the past 24 hours or so, following the second assassination attempt against Donald Trump, one that did not come close. I should mention that, and not nowhere near close as the first one. But in this case, certainly it gives people a jolt in politics. Do you see that? Do you think the discourse in American politics is encouraging these types of violent events, and what can we learn from that here?
Yeah, I think the discourse is highly toxic, and as much as we're not thrilled with how toxic it is in Canada, it's way worse in the States, in a much more violent society with a lot more guns. So, the consequences tend to be more dire. This notion of blaming the Democrats for calling out Trump for being a threat to democracy, I think is a little rich considering Trump's discourse over the last, I don't know how many years. So, it's a problem in the States. We're seeing it. It's not like we're immune to it in Canada. We've seen threats. We've seen violent threats against elected officials. And I think we need to be concerned. We need to make sure that we're not, following down that slippery slope. I've heard toxic language in Canada, but I haven't heard language where, for the most part, people are, questioning the legitimacy of elected officials, the legitimacy of elections, and like raising it to the point where it's existential and people want to take things into their own hands. There are a few, but we haven't heard that so far. I hope we don't go down that level. I'm not super optimistic because, when you're losing and when you're desperate, that may lead you to go too far. And look, we've seen Pierre Poilievre have a rhetoric that I don't say is dangerous, but is pretty far out there. We heard him on the weekend talking about how the carbon tax is going to lead to the apocalypse and how people are not going to be able to eat or heat themselves. The extreme apocalyptic version was a little over the top. But every time he goes down that path, it actually tends to hurt him and he loses 1 or 2 points. He's still got this huge lead, but that's actually what turns people off. So let's look at that over the next few months and see if he's able to maintain sort of the attack without the vitriol.
Jonathan Kalles, Senior Director at McMillan Vantage, a national public affairs firm and former advisor to PM Trudeau. Thanks very much, Jonathan.
Thanks, Dan.